Gracious God, it truly is an honor to be elected to serve in these seats and to make decisions on behalf of the people of Shiawassee County. And so tonight we ask for your wisdom and direction as we make decisions about allocating resources and other decisions that we truly would serve the people we've been elected to serve. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Amen.
Madam Clerk, if you do the roll call, please. Bill is excused today.
Pardon?
Bill is excused today.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Webster?
Here.
Commissioner Holzhausen?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson is excused. Commissioner Garber?
Here.
Commissioner Howard?
Here.
Commissioner Emery?
Here.
And Chairman Broder?
Here. Thank you. This time I'd be looking for a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved. Support.
I have a motion with support. Any changes, discussion on the agenda? All in favor of approving that agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda is approved. This time I'd be looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the June 14th, 2023 Board of Commissioners meeting.
So moved.
Support.
I have a motion with two supports. Discussion on the minutes. All in favor of approving those minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. This time I'd be looking for a motion to approve the bills.
All right, I move to approve the invoice edit reports dated 6/13, 6/16, 6/21, 6/23, 6/27, and 6/29, and authorize the treasurer to draw warrants for the same in the amount of $3,123,605.45, which includes both batch and wire EFTs.
Support.
I have a motion with support. Questions or discussions regarding the bills? In that case, I'd request a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Holzhausen?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson is excused. Commissioner Garber?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
Commissioner Emery?
Yes.
Commissioner Webster?
Yes.
Chairman Broder?
Yes. Thank you. Bills are approved. Dr. Boggs, I believe we have two presentations before our chance for the public to address us.
Yes. Our first one is on the Emergency Housing Task Force. Hannah.
Hi,
Hello.
thanks for having me. My name is Hannah Gottschalk. I am the Executive Director of Safe Center Domestic and Sexual Violence Services of Clinton and Shiawassee counties. I am here in another capacity though today. I am representing the Shiawassee County Emergency Shelter Task Force, which is a committee of the Shiawassee County Housing and Homeless Coalition. We have put together the first annual report detailing homelessness in Shiawassee County. It is the first report of its kind for the county. It is, please note, just a sort of foundational report. We have been getting a lot of feedback on the report as to things that can be included moving forward. So we just wanted to get a baseline of data to start collecting information about what homelessness looks like in our rural community, because we know that it exists and we know that it's a problem here. Anyone that works on the front lines, whether we're service providers, churches, etc., who are working with the homeless, know that it's a problem here, but we wanted to really show the numbers and what's going on in the community. So I'll just, obviously you all have copies of the report. For others who are here, I also have copies if you'd like to see it. This entails data for those who are members of the Homeless Coalition, so we have a streamlined process of how we collect that data. But this shows data for Capital Area Community Services under Becky Zemla, who they previously ran the Housing Assessment Referral Agency, which was the HARA, so the single point of entry for homeless services in the county. So all of the primary homeless services that were offered, you can see that a lot of homeless individuals and those at risk of homelessness were funneled through their agency for various types of assistance last year. Safe Center, we are a two-county agency, but this shows the numbers that we served in Shiawassee County. I will tell you, being a two-county service area, the majority of those that we serve are in Shiawassee County, primarily because our shelter is here in Owasso. Our numbers do look a little different previous years for last year because of COVID. We were at 50% capacity in our shelter for a part of the year, and then moved to 75% of the capacity, and then to 100% capacity because of COVID. So the numbers are skewed. Things should look normal moving forward now that we're out of the pandemic. I think some of the most staggering numbers you'll see are the McKinney-Vento numbers of students. This details those students who are essentially couch homeless or literally homeless who are attending schools in our communities. Langsburg is the outlier, and I think that comes down to a lack of maybe understanding what numbers they should be collecting, so we're working with them through the McKinney-Vento program and the McKinney-Vento liaison to understand what numbers they need to be collecting. But you will see very high numbers, surprisingly high numbers, of students who are considered homeless in our community. I think these numbers are rather shocking. So we have a lot of students who are lacking secure housing, and their parents are probably lacking a lot of resources and help to get secure housing as well. Great Lakes Bay Health Centers also provided data, and they have been assisting folks with social determinants of health, which is otherwise known as basic needs, food, clothing, shelter, and then other types and forms of assistance as well. Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness also provided some data. Some of their data would be duplicates of data that's already included because they're the overarching entity for housing assistance and homeless provision and technical assistance for the state. We are looking to get more information and data on veterans because that's one area where we do not have a lot of data, but I'm working with Veterans Affairs for the county and other veteran services locally to get their data captured too. And then there's a list of those who help the homeless or those at risk of homelessness who are active members and participants within the Homeless Coalition. And then our greatest needs here in Shiawassee County, which is an emergency shelter, motel and hotel funding, affordable and safe housing, landlords who are willing to work with agencies, services for the currently homeless, including showers, laundry, safe place to store personal belongings, case management, supportive services, and warming and cooling centers that are open during evenings and weekends. It's been very, very hot out. We've had homeless individuals who have been suffering heat stroke. And then when it's cold out, we've had members of our community die who have, frozen to death from the cold. Safe Center operates an emergency shelter 24/7, 365. We are specific to domestic and sexual violence, but we have folks who frequently call us who don't meet our criteria, trying to get into our shelter because we are, a shelter and they need a safe place to go. So they know what to say to get in, even though they don't necessarily meet our criteria, and we do whatever we can to try to serve them and get them where they need to go. We also have a 24-hour crisis line, and because 211 isn't always the most helpful, unfortunately, they will often call us and talk to our hotline workers ad nauseum, trying to get the assistance that they need. So we really need a shelter, and we really need a referral network here that can help our homeless population, and that's what we're really looking to do. We realize it's a dream, and we realize it's going to take a lot of work, but there's a group of us that are very committed to getting this done and making it happen. We've already had some potential funders reach out who are interested in helping us, but we really need the community's support, and so we're doing a lot of meetings with stakeholders, community members, and folks such as yourselves to talk about the issue and get the word out there. So that's what I had for tonight. I don't know if there's any questions or anything else.
I had a few. Nobody else wants to go first? And I'm looking at your numbers, and I heard a lot of different things from you, and the category seems to kind of vary to a large degree. Homeless, in danger of homeless. Now, homeless in your discussion does not mean unsheltered necessarily.
Correct.
For instance, it sounds like if my children lost their home to the bank and moved in with me, you would consider them homeless.
In some capacities, yes. So for like McKinney-Vento in that program, if they are couch homeless or moving from like home to home to home, they might have a roof over their heads, but they don't have a permanent home. They're going from place to place. They're still considered homeless. The HUD definition can vary for different types of assistance. That would be literally homeless. So there are different types and different categories of homelessness that we're dealing with.
It seems a very important distinction regarding what kind or if, government should intervene in these situations, whether it's family having a rough time or, kids living in a van.
Yeah.
I think that's a very, and I would be interested to see how these statistics are gathered on the schools and what their definition is, because another category that seems to be very important, similar to when we talk about the poor, for instance, we can say we have this 15% of people in the country who are poor, but what a lot of people don't realize is people move in and out of that category. You may be poor this year and middle class next year, and somebody else may slip. So what I'm saying is the chronic versus the temporarily
Sure.
homeless. My kids in the example, if they moved in with me, would very likely be temporarily home. I don't think your average person on the street would consider my grandkids living with me in my big home to be homeless or in danger or in need of somebody's intervention. Rather, their family had a tough time, and as soon as they get themselves straightened out, they'll get the heck back out of my house and on their own.
Sure.
These seem to be very important distinctions in this discussion.
Sure. Yeah, so there would be the economic instability, the food insecurity. There's other qualifying factors here that play into that. And that's another piece that we want to put into the report as well, is understanding what those definitions of homelessness are too.
So I think an important distinction is people who have been evicted and who are living with others who are not financially secure. And that's a very tenuous arrangement. And I would, from my experience as a school board member, would say most of those McKinney-Vento kids are in that category and not in the category of our family has resources, but one family member lost a home, so they're living with another family member who has resources, and that may work out. But many of these are very tenuous living arrangements where somebody is doubled up.
Yes. I know from a recent point in time count that was done, and we typically do what's called a pit count or a point in time count. On the coldest day of the year, January, that's a lot of fun for all of us. We recently did that, and there are 17 people living along the river right now in tents, and there's 7 women living with their children in cars here in the city limits of Owasso. So, I mean, that's just one example. Now, that didn't go county-wide, to Durand and Perry and Morris and things like that, but that gives you an example of just what's going on maybe right here in this area. So,
I was rather taken aback by again, on these McKinney-Vento figures for Morris and Perry, both school districts here live in my district, because if you just look at this, it would be rather alarming to anybody, because that might be maybe a quarter of the enrollment. So I guess it says at the top paragraph here, your thing, it says these data seem to be their concern for students without documents normally required for enrollment, so that they can stay in one school even if they're changing residences. I don't know how that relates directly to these kids having a roof over their heads. Certainly wouldn't, somebody could come up in these figures and have a place that might not be a legal residence. At least they would be sheltered in some way, would they not?
They would. What those are talking about, so for instance, sometimes you'll have a student who's enrolled in Owasso schools and they're living with family members and that doesn't work out. So they go over to stay in a shelter in Flint. So they don't have papers to show residency necessarily where they are living or where they've come from. It just depends on where the journey has taken them. But if they've been in Owasso schools, even though they're living in Flint, we now have to provide county-to-county transportation. So Flint schools has to bring them to the county line, and Owasso schools brings them up to Owasso schools so that the students can stay in the same school district and not have to move. That's the whole purpose of McKinney-Vento, really, is so that students can have school stability even when their housing situation is moving around. In short, that's what all of that means.
So I can look at this and not be appalled that 40% of the kids in Perry are unsheltered or out under some viaduct somewhere. If this is more concerned with the educational meeting the requirements of being in a school district and taking part in their school programs, because that has monetary impact on the local community. The first time I looked at this data, I thought I can't believe that many kids are homeless in the school districts of my district. So these data are not concerned so much with that issue as it's concerned with getting the kids the right papers for the right school district and so on. And it sounds like they're moving around not because of any governmental activity, but they're moving because they have family issues and so on. And anyway, I think your report can be, I don't know if misleading is quite the word, but perhaps it would be, it takes one aback
Sure.
over an issue that
Yeah.
maybe isn't as prominent an issue as we might otherwise think.
I think it speaks to the housing instability and the lack of affordable housing. That's what it speaks to me, is that people are doubled up because they can't afford their own place. So it speaks to that issue and to the risk of, they are at risk for being homeless because at any time, that family that they're doubled up with can say you're out because they're not on the lease. There's no eviction process. They can just put them out on the street, and that happens very frequently.
I would love to see the data behind the numbers here, like what prompts somebody to get put in that number, with all of them, not just the McKinney veto, but all these, what's the data behind that? I realize the numbers are there for shock value, but I want the data behind it to get to the real truth. I think it's a little, okay, shock, great, but let's get the real, what you talked about verbally was how many people are actually on the street in Owasso, right, on a cold night, not, okay, well, someone had one night where they were out for some reason and nobody knows why.
Yes, we seem to have, as I said, a conglomeration of different problems here, lumped under a homeless moniker that perhaps is not, when you're involved in it every day, you might see that, but the average person, you say homeless, is much more going to picture the extreme problems you mentioned. I mean, if there's a mother and her children living in a car, that's something that needs immediate attention. I've been out to the river, I've seen the tents, it's heartbreaking. Families living together with friends or relatives, while it is unfortunate and insecure, is more common in history than not. Families sharing homes and so on, often transitional, again, very different. I did notice, however, under the health and wellness, the male versus female I found interesting, that the percentage of male was 3 times female, and it has been, again, my experience that women who often have children have quite a number of services that they can tap into because we have to care for children. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Whereas single men, there's pretty much nothing out there for them. Would you tend to agree with that?
I mean, Safe Center serves men, but I mean.
But the service is available.
It can be challenging for men, there's no doubt about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just an observation, and
Yeah.
not a blame or finger pointing or anything.
Yeah.
I just noted
Yeah.
that men are far more likely to be drug addicted, alcoholics, victims of violence, any number of things. Men have very high statistics on those things.
Yeah.
I did have another question.
Sure.
if I may. You, I think, alluded somewhat to a shelter here in Owasso.
Yeah, I mean, we would love to see something like that in the future.
does this report take into account the shelter that we do have here?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Yeah. Mhm.
Any other questions? That was informative. Thank you for your time. We
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
All right, we have another presentation.
We do. Michelle from the Greater Lansing Food Bank.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, hello. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the presentation. It kind of sets up, I think, some of the things that we're facing and dealing with as well. I did give presentations, I think you all have them as well. There are a few extra ones, perfect, if anybody from the audience would like one afterwards, or I can always email them out to you. So I'm the CEO of the Greater Lansing Food Bank, and I suppose you're probably wondering why I would be here talking to you here in Shiawassee County. And that's because food banks, differently than food pantries, food banks are set up to serve a large territory. So Greater Lansing Food Bank actually covers 7 counties, and you'll see that on slide number 2 on that very front page. All of the counties that are assigned to our territory, including Shiawassee. So we have Tri-County, Ingham, Eaton, Clinton, and then we go all the way up 127 to Clare County and Shiawassee on the east. There are 7 total food banks in Michigan, and we are the second smallest of the food banks. So the other food banks serve a larger population and more counties, except for one other food bank, and that's the one that's down by Ann Arbor. So my goal today really is to introduce or reintroduce for some of you what we are as a food bank, how we work with all of the pantries, the agencies, the shelters in the communities, and what our role is versus their role, and then to talk about what the food insecurity rates are looking like in your county, the resources that we have available to your constituents, your residents, and how you can help direct people to the food resources that are already here and existing. So I'm going to walk you all through the presentation, those of you who have this. The first thing I want to talk about is really what a food bank is and why it's a little different maybe than what you think it is. We're actually a warehouse and distribution center, and our job is to procure as much food as we possibly can, either for free or to purchase it ourselves, so that the pantries, the agencies, the shelters in your communities can get the food from us for their agencies. So we literally have an ordering system online that the pantries that are partners of ours will go on. They can order X number of cases of tomato sauce or pasta or fresh fruits and produce, or milk and other dairies or frozen meats even, from us as a distribution center. So we really do work as a partnership with all of those agencies. We have about 150 agencies and partners in our 7 counties. There is a slide in here a couple of pages from now that will show you which partners we have in Shiawassee County. We would love to add more, so if there are other organizations that you know of that aren't listed in that group, please direct them to us. We'd love to talk to them about getting resources from the food bank. The next slide, which is labeled slide number 4 for you, shows really how a food bank procures food, where we get food from, so all the sources, and then how it gets distributed out and the different types of agencies that take food from us. So just a couple of notes there. We do work with the state and the federal government to bring food down into the state of Michigan and distribute it out to your residents, to your constituents. It's one of the contracts that our Food Bank Association as a state holds. There's the 7 of us are part of that state association. So we do the work contractually for the federal government to distribute out to the community. The local action agency also has some of that contract as well, and they distribute food out that way also. We do get a lot of food from retail sources, so the Kroger's and the Meijer's and the Costco's of the world, they donate to food banks anything that they feel like they can't sell. A good example is, we just finished 4th of July weekend, so there was a lot of red, white, and blue packaging out there in the marketplace. As soon as the 5th of July hits, none of us want to purchase that food anymore for some reason, because the package is red, white, and blue, even though the food inside is perfectly fine. So those kinds of products get donated back to food banks, and we are able to redistribute that then to the pantries and the agencies that are in the community. It used to be where that food would just literally go in landfill, and that was unfortunate for a whole lot of reasons. So we recapture that food and redistribute it back out into the community. So if you flip the page, a little bit of Greater Lansing Food Bank by the numbers. This is slide number 5 for you. Last year, we actually distributed about 9.1 million meals in our 7-county area. That is equivalent to about 12 million pounds of food, for those of you who like to measure in pounds. And we held 226 what we call mobile food distributions throughout the area. So each county, each month in Shiawassee County, we have between 4 and 5 mobile food distributions here. Probably the biggest one is over at the YMCA in Owasso that we run monthly. And this is where you've seen in the video where cars will line up. We bring our big trucks with all different types of food, and the volunteers actually put the food right in the trunks of the vehicles of those who are food insecure, who come through the line. It was highlighted a lot during the pandemic. That was one of the kind of the infamous media scenes that you saw about food banks during the pandemic, was a mobile food distribution. And then you can see we also distribute everything from children's backpacks. We did 80,000 last year. These are weekend food kits that can go home with children through the school districts who are food insecure. So they have food to eat on weekends or even during school breaks when they might not be receiving meals at the school for school lunches. And we also, most recently, because of the homeless, the unhoused crisis that we're seeing in a lot of different areas of the 7 counties, including downtown Lansing and up in Clare County as well, we started putting together food kits for those who are unhoused. And if you think about if you don't have shelter, you don't have a place to store food, you don't have a place to heat food up, so the packaging has to be very unique. If you're in a tent, it has to be open and eat, but yet nutritious enough to give you some type of health for being in that homeless situation. So we do a lot of innovative work creating new products as issues like this come up around our communities, and we can react very quickly to what's happening and adjust and create a product specifically for people of certain populations like this. So what does the food insecurity rate right now look like in your county? This is on slide number 6. I can tell you the average across the nation in a county is around 10%. So that means 10% of the population at any given time is going to be food insecure. That's average. In Shiawassee County, we're a little bit higher than the average. So you're close to 12%, as you see here. During the height of the pandemic, your county was closer to 13%. So when the stimulus dollars started coming out, the food insecurity rates actually dropped during 2021 because those stimulus dollars worked. People were using that to purchase food, and as soon as that happens, then some folks come off the food insecurity rate because they are able to purchase their own food. When the stimulus dollars all went away, and after the SNAP benefits, there were extra SNAP benefits also that were distributed out through February of this year. When those went away, and then of course food inflation hit, and general inflation hit, now we're seeing the numbers tick back up. So that's why we're up to almost 12% again in the county of Shiawassee. When you start breaking it down by race and other subpopulations, you will see a significant difference in the number of people who are food insecure. So for example, for your county, those who are Hispanic race, their food insecurity rate is about 15% versus the white population that lives in your county, their average food insecurity rate is about 10%, which is, as I stated before, kind of the average across America. If you flip the page, I talked a little bit more about what food insecurity actually means. So we used to call this hunger. And now what we realize is that any one of us could be hungry at any given time. You might be hungry right now because it's dinner time, doesn't necessarily mean you're food insecure. So it's a combination of a number of things. Everything from your income level to, you know, a bunch of other things that go together. But essentially what it means is that you are without reliable access to food that is affordable and nutritious on a regular basis. Okay? And I gave an example of some of the people that we serve. The majority of the people that we see are as follows. They are senior citizens on a fixed income. They are the disabled. They are children, by and large. They are unhoused. They have low to moderate income levels. And this is important because it isn't just those at the federal poverty level or below nowadays, especially those who have not caught up financially from the COVID situation if they were off work or if they have a medical issue. Those folks might be considered to be in a moderate income level, but they have so much debt because of what has happened over the last few years or in their life if there was an emergency or a crisis, that they are now deemed food insecure as well, and they are in need. And a lot of working single parents. I can also tell you that 80% of the population that we serve are working. They're piecing together part-time jobs, they're trying to make ends meet, but because of inflation, and because of the high cost of food, they're not able to afford everything in their household budget and food as well. Food has just gotten too expensive, especially nutritious food. And of course, as the gentlewoman who spoke before me said, food has a direct correlation to a person's medical conditions. It is a social determinant of health. It's one of the basic needs that we all need, along with food, water, shelter, clothing. And if somebody has poor nutritional habits, and oftentimes that comes because they cannot afford better food. There's a lot of other reasons too. We won't get into that right now. But if they cannot afford good food, their medical condition is going to suffer. And then we know that they are more chronically ill. If a person has diabetes or other chronic condition, we know that they're going to end up in the hospital more often. If they are already of low income, then all of society is paying for those visits to the emergency room. So this is a proactive way. Food is a proactive way of helping people to improve their chronic condition. Okay. I'm going to try to go a little bit more quickly because I know that you have a full agenda on your to cover, and I have quite a few more slides. So let me just focus on a couple of things. During the first 6 months of this year, and I put the numbers here for you, we have seen 20% and higher rate of increases of the number of households coming out to seek food from us and from our pantry partners. So you can see the last 3 months, 25% increase in May over May last year.
Is that Shiawassee County now?
This is for all of our 7 counties.
Your 7 counties.
Yep, all of our 7 counties. April 21%, March 23%. We had never seen this high of an increase year over year since during the pandemic. And this is the second time now that we are witnessing this in our history. So it's getting really hard out there again. So I'm actually going to skip to slide number 10 because I want you all to know where the resources are. I think this is important for you to be able to share with your constituents. On our website, we have a pantry locator. So people can go on there, greaterlansingfoodbank.org. You can zoom in where you live, and you can find the closest pantry to you. Then you can click on it and see what their hours are. You can get the phone number, and a person can go receive food if they are in need. I will also tell you, however, sometimes people don't want to go to the closest pantry that they live to because of the stigma. So if you can think about having to go out and ask for food, that's a really embarrassing situation. And we know there's a lot of folks who are food insecure who just will never go out and ask for food because of the stigma that's surrounding it. So people will often go to a pantry in the next city over where they probably won't know anyone, or even in a county over, even though it might be a little bit farther transportation-wise, simply because they don't want to run into somebody who then knows that they are in trouble financially. The next slide, slide number 11, shows the pantries the agencies, the nonprofits that we work with here in the area, in your county, and also community kitchens that get food from us, children's backpack programs, and even a residential home that we work with that get food from us. So last year in your county, we distributed over 540,000 meals. So there's a slide in there that shows just specifically for your area. If you turn that into what the retail value is, it's about $1.1 million in retail that people would have had to spend that they just did not have the money for. And we were able to distribute that out with our partners. Okay, I'm going to skip to the last page because I feel like I'm going way over the time that I should be spending. And I want to leave time for questions if you want. But what can we all do, right? We can all stay hopeful. We can direct people to resources. We can share this information with your residents. We can all do food drives or fund drives to assist with this effort. You can volunteer. We have in our facility, which I know is down in, it's in Bath, actually, it's in Clinton County. We have a volunteer center there where people can come in and pack food up, sort food, check expiration dates, things like that. But even within the county here, each of the mobile food distributions or the pantries all need volunteers. So if you're interested in helping out in this in this area, we would love to have you volunteer. And then if you ever come across any funding for Health and Human Services basic needs through either grants that come down that are available to you or dollars that you have in the budget that are set aside for Health and Human Services, please let us know. And we will work to either write for those grants or to somehow have the conversations we need to have to bring the food and the dollars back to this community. And then what we're doing at Greater Lansing Food Bank is planning for an increase. We know that what we have seen so far in the 20 to 25% range is probably not the highest it's going to be as far as food insecurity. So we are doing more fundraising, food raising, and procuring food so that we can distribute it back out. So again, thank you for allowing me time. Happy to answer any questions, or I can ask you questions. Happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
I guess I had a question that your very first slide talked about the warehouse and distribution center of the region, but with respect to the food banks, now, when you present this data, what % of your operating funding is governmental funds versus the private donations and so on?
Yeah,
Just roughly.
very good question. So very little is governmental funding. It used to be before 2021, we would get about 35% of our food through the USDA. But because of food supply chain issues, and the government wasn't able to get the food to get to the food banks, last year it dropped down to 17% of the food that we took in.
Yeah, I think that was
from
in the last
USDA.
couple slides.
Yeah.
So, but what the problem is, not that there's less food from USDA, but that there is just a problem with getting it through the food chain, or not the food chain, the transportation, logistical chain, is that?
Not exactly. They were actually not able to purchase the food from American farmers because it wasn't available. So it was being purchased by retail stores because retailers were willing to spend more money to get the food that they needed to get on the shelves in the grocery store. So the USDA wasn't even able to procure it, to turn it around and get it to us. And then how it also works, and this is kind of getting in the weeds, so I'll try to be quick, but the funding from there is a little bit of funding that comes down from the USDA to go with the food for administration of that food, things like transportation or warehousing, things like that. That was, because the food did not come, then the funding doesn't come with it as well. So that was less as well.
So what you're describing, I think, is really a double hit from inflation. We had inflation in the cost of the food that highly impacted the poor people, so to speak, having to make the purchases. And then the inflation hit, as I understand watching the news, the transportation of food around you. So you're saying that was a big impact on the USDA providing food for your programs?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So consequently, we ended up purchasing a lot more food this year because we didn't want to send out less to our pantries. So we purchased twice as much as we had ever purchased before. And of course, that was at a more expensive cost because food was more expensive.
I had a question and sort of a comment. First of all, and I know there's your group, and then there are the food bank, the fruit pantry, but when people show up, you mentioned the lines of cars and so on. How do you know those people are food insecure?
Yeah, it's a really good question.
I've known people who absolutely counted on their local food pantry, usually temporarily at a bad spot, and I've known people who take terrible advantage of it if there's no means testing. Now, if you count everyone as food, everyone who shows up, well, they must be in trouble. I don't think that would be a good statistic.
Right, exactly. So here's what we know from research and from doing this work for over 40 years. The majority of people will not show up and ask for food who do not actually need it. We've all known a few people who will take advantage of any system that's out there, whether that be the very, very poor or the very, very rich. So if we disenfranchise everybody by saying, oh, you must bring your wage statements. What if somebody's not working? How can you verify, right? We're not the federal government. They have some certain means tests that are very, very strict for Charitable Food Network. We also know that the stigma that surrounds going out and asking for food is such that people aren't going to do it except for the very few. Now, I'm willing to serve 400 people in one or two slip through. I'm willing to do that. And the rest of the food banks across America are as well. There are certain things that we do ask, but by federal government standards, we are not allowed to ask for certain things as well. And that is income, verifying residency. We cannot ask for that. Because again, we know that people don't always want to go to their closest pantry. So if somebody is in the county next to you and comes over here, we know that some people who live here are going to go over there, and it's going to be kind of a wash. So if somebody is simply is enrolled in a SNAP program or a WIC program, or they receive free and reduced school lunches, they are automatically eligible. Because none of those programs alone are going to supply the month's worth of food that a person needs. It gets you a little bit, but it doesn't get you everything. For an example, the SNAP benefits for senior citizens. During the pandemic, they were getting about $80 to $90 per senior citizen extra in a given month. That has now gone away. So the average that a senior citizen is receiving now per month in food benefits from the state of Michigan is $30. There's no way a senior citizen is going to be able to survive on $30 worth of food. So if they are eligible for that program, then they automatically qualify as well. But I can tell you, we are not going to turn somebody away who comes to us for food because of that.
The other comment I have, and I might be wrong, this is hardly my specialty. Similar to the last presenter, I'm a little, suspicious of some of how you gather the data and your definitions when you add in nutritious and so on. Your figures tell me that in my county there are over 7,000 people.
Correct.
That number seems very high to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but I am suspicious of your number, I have to admit.
Yes. I can tell you, you should question the numbers. We all should question data, right? Because it can certainly be skewed by whomever is doing the research. But I can tell you that that's accurate. And there's a lot of underground food insecurity across America. We are the richest country, and we have one of the highest food insecurity rates of countries that are our richness, if you will. So I would be happy to send you the exact way those numbers are put together. I'll grab your email address and we can do that. But the other thing that you have to take into consideration is the average cost of living in your county. Because if your average cost of living, and I think in most of the 7 counties that we serve, it's somewhere around, it would take $50,000 to $55,000 a year to just make your budget when you're talking about housing and utility costs and taxes that come out of your paychecks, and things like oil changes or transportation. It's between $50,000 to $55,000 average in Michigan. Most of the, I shouldn't say most, a lot of the jobs or the households that are in your county, especially rural counties, do not add up to that amount of money. So when you look at folks who can't even meet that budget, you're talking about people who are going to be food insecure.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Other questions? Thank you for your time.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, this would be, make sure I'm in the right place here. This would be our first opportunity for the public to address this board. Anyone? I don't have any slips. Shelley, please come forward.
I don't want to take much of your time, but ironically, I put all of these meetings in my calendar for the whole year, and when I can attend, I do attend. And tonight, I just happened to last minute be able to attend, and I was unaware that the Emergency Housing Task Force was going to be on the agenda tonight. But I would like to add that as the director, one of my many hats, of the homeless shelter in Owasso, the only homeless shelter that we have, I have not been included in these meetings and invited to these meetings or had conversations. I'd like to say that I do believe that we do have some very legitimate concerns for emergency housing, but my views probably on what that should look like or could look like, or what I'm experiencing on my side of things could be a little different or maybe much different than their ideas, but I would certainly be willing to entertain some ideas of conversations and part of that, as not just only the director of the shelter, but I also was the manager of the Salvation Army the year that we had a warming center there. So I do have some good information that I would like to be able to be a part of that. So that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, then we will move on to committee reports. Gary, could we start with you today?
Yes, I'm on the 911 board, and they're still going on with their tower, their new tower. It's going to take a year and a half or so to get it started and get all the paperwork done. It'll cost about $2.3 million or more. It should help. Also, I'm on the senior citizen board, and they're still talking about a little bit about the old high school in Owasso. Maybe we might be able to move over there because we need to add on for more meals, and we need a bigger kitchen and stuff like that, so they might want to add ons to move over there, but that's just in the talking stage so far. I'm on the health and wellness board, and they're taking care of all the handicapped and disadvantaged people over there, and things are moving right along, and they got a good budget. So, and on the Shiawassee Economic Board with Justin Horvat, and they got new people coming all over in the county looking for build new offices and new businesses. So that's moving right along. So that's it.
Thank you. Cindy?
Okay, two things. One of the things that I think we've talked about for a number of years has been our code enforcement, our blight. We did have a resident, as we recall at last month's meetings, which prompted a bit of a conversation with our attorney. So I don't want to have that conversation tonight, but I would like to look, I would really like us to look at that ordinance, look at that process. I know that the ordinances have been in a rewrite or evaluation for a while, but I'd really like to dig into that a little deeper and see how it works. Does it work? Could it work better? Is there something that we can do better or that we don't need to do at all? But just really look at some options. So more to come on that.
Would you like a presentation next month or the month after from Pete and Eric related to the powers and authorities that the county has to do such things, and then what kind of steps you could take related to ordinances.
Yeah, that sounds a little dry, but,
How about interactive?
but yeah,
I'd like that.
yeah, because I've had this conversation, and in my district, it's a hot topic. So if it is not the county's responsibility, should it be? Should it not? You know, I would like us to have that conversation in a more factual way, so that when I hear, you know, the county's not doing this, the county's not doing that, I want to be able to say, here's what we can do, should do, and yeah, thank you.
Maybe we'll do it during the committee meeting. Most people will be.
Perfect. Item 2, this is July, so it's not ideal planting conditions. Typically, you do your planting in the spring and the fall. That's ideal for your plants. Our veterans facility, because it's done now, the plants have been put in July. Several of them are dead and dying. We've also put a lot of money into hydro seeding that needs to be watered a lot. I believe that we can get those plants replaced, but we're going to have the same problem again. So what I would like is that we come up with a plan by tomorrow on how we can get those plants watered, so that when we come to our open house, we don't say, oh, welcome, here's our dead plants. Some of it is there's an overhang. Might not be the best placement. We might need to relook at that, but that's not the whole problem. So we need to come up with a way to get those plants watered, if we're going to have plants at all.
We could spray paint them green.
We could.
That's a good point.
So we need to figure out whose job that is, and I guess if not, me and Gary could maybe do it, Gary. So, I don't know.
We could probably find some cooperation.
Yes, we need, but time is of the essence. It's hot, it's dry, until a plant is established. Now next year, it's not gonna be as critical, but I think, you know, we've planted plants before. They need a little extra care when you first put them in the ground. That's not happening. So, any suggestions?
You all set?
Yep.
Commissioner?
A few things. We are still waiting for award notice from the Community Corrections Advisory Board MDOC grant. I believe those come in August or the 1st of September, so it'll be a little bit on that. Tomorrow, Chairman Brodeur, myself, and Dr. Boggs are meeting with Amy, who was here from the Michigan Association of Counties regarding the opioid money, to just have an initial conversation about what it might look like to move forward with some sort of planned strategy for what to do with those monies as they come in. And then just quickly, some of us, I attended a meeting in this room invited, I think, by Justin Horvath regarding the statewide housing plan. And there were a couple of follow-up meetings. I attended that yesterday in Lapeer. And so we are grouped in a region, GLS, Genesee, Lapeer, Shiawassee. And there's just a really quick turnaround happening where each region is being requested to put together a housing strategy for their region. And so the state has set 8 priority areas, and yesterday we were supposed to choose 3, although our group was incorrigible and we insisted on choosing 4. And so I won't name all 8, but the 4 that we are looking at is the housing ecosystem, housing stock. Those 2 things seem a little related, but they're slightly different. Rental housing and communication and education. So there's going to be money coming from the state to help with rehabbing rental housing, new housing developments, new builds, whatever we come up with as the regional plan. And so each region is submitting their plan to the state by the end of August. And so yesterday I was there, Justin Horvath was there, I know Kim from Community Foundation was there. I'm trying to think of who else was there from Shiawassee County, there were others. But about 75 people from the 3 county area met to do step 1 of developing our housing priorities for this region. And we meet again, and we formed subgroups. I'm co-chairing the communication and education one. But the next big meeting is in August.
Thank you.
Commissioner?
Just one question, if I may, on that issue of this plan that has to be put together now. Do you think that that's a reasonable amount of time to put the plan together? I mean, I get concerned when state money maybe becomes available and all of a sudden we gotta run around.
So it's a broad plan, so each of those 4 committees that we're forming are gonna set some priority areas, but there's gonna be ongoing couple of years of work that follows that. But what is due by August 31st is just sort of we had to pick, yesterday we picked our priority areas, and then at the next meeting, we'll try to set priorities for each of those groups. Each group will choose 3 or 4 areas to focus on, but those groups will continue to meet for the next couple of years. So the work's not happening that
It's not
fast, it's
major,
just
right.
some stages. But the initial plan will be, you gotta set your priority areas by August 31st.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Yeah, Parks and Rec did not meet. July's our summer break. Planning Commission did meet. We sent out our first revised ordinance to the townships to review. And when that comes back, that'll come back before the Planning Commission and then before this board to adopt. It's not the entire rewrite, just one small section of it that we sent out that I think we're making some good improvements on.
Do you think any of it's going to be controversial or?
Everything's controversial.
Okay.
I think there was unanimous agreement on the Planning Commission.
Oh,
So,
all right. Commissioner Emery, please.
I don't have any specific reports, but I do want to raise an issue. We heard tonight from the Shiawassee Emergency Shelter Task Force, as I understand, Ms. Nikki, she was not involved in that process, and yet she runs our local housing, homeless shelter, and I would like to perhaps have her make a report from the perspective of Owasso and Shiawassee County in light of the presentation that made by the task force at some point.
Shelley, would you be willing to do that in some time in the future? All right, then we'll discuss that when we have some time and see if that's a possibility. All right then. Thank you all. Let's move on to our motions. Commissioner Howard, please.
yes, I move to accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission and amend the zoning map through ordinance 23-07-02, changing the parcel from A2 to B2.
I'll make the motion. Support.
Have motion support. Any further discussion on that?
Just very briefly, Mr. Wheeler purchased a piece of property right in front of the racetrack. It's a house, and he wants to include that with all the rest of the property that's part of the racetrack.
I'm sure everybody was.
Maybe an acre. It's not a terribly big house that sits right in front of it.
He was already surrounding it.
Yeah, the racetrack's surrounded it.
So
I was at Middlebury Township meeting last night, and they, I know Middlebury over the course of the last several years has had a love-hate relationship with the racetrack. But everybody seems to, at the township board level, I can't speak for the citizens, but, and I haven't had any complaints, but everybody at the township board level was looking forward to this approval. They are positive about the things that are happening with the racetrack. They all seem very favorable with what's happening there, so.
from an economic development, I'm thrilled. I was very concerned about that piece of property for a lot of years that someday it would be abandoned, and it's gone completely the other way. If you've been out there, been past it, better every day. It's looking great. All right, we'll need a roll call, please.
Commissioner Johnson is excused. Commissioner Garber,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Emery,
Yes.
Webster,
Yes.
Commissioner Olshausen,
Yes.
and Chairman Broder.
Yes.
I move to approve the minutes of the July 10th, 2023 Economic and Physical Development Committee meeting.
I got motion with support, discussion on the minutes. All in favor of approving those minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you, Commissioner Howard.
Thank you.
Commissioner Garber.
I move that we approve the recommended second quarter budget adjustment for wages and benefits, general ledger, and all our other funds as presented.
Support?
I have a motion with support, discussion on that item.
It balances out to a net zero. We're halfway through the year. These are just some adjustments between accounts.
We do this sort of thing every year.
We try to do it every quarter, and it wasn't our practice several years ago, but we've gotten to the point of making these adjustments every quarter. As we move into the third quarter, that's when we'll start seeing how well the departments have actually been on target for the budget. But right now, I think we're fairly on target. Most of these things are related to healthcare, some operating supplies, some contract law. Nothing impressive.
Very good. Further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Garber,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Emery,
Yes.
Commissioner Webster,
Yes.
Commissioner Olshausen,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson is excused, and Chairman Broder.
Yes.
I move that we approve the appointment of Commissioner Garber as the MERS delegate.
Support.
I got a motion with support. Any discussion on that item? Pretty standard. We're replacing John Plowman. All in favor of approving that appointment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you. I move that we approve the minutes of the July 10th, 2023 Finance and Administration Committee meeting.
Support?
Got a motion with support. Discussion on the minutes. All in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you, Commissioner Garber. Commissioner Webster.
I move to approve the contract renewal for the Cooperative Reimbursement Program for the Friend of the Court and authorize the chair to execute the same.
Support.
Motion with support. Just want to make
This is a very important grant for us operationally. It allows us to get reimbursed for 66% of all expenditures that take place in front of the court. They say a grant is from the state, but it's in 5-year increments, and this has been an ongoing thing for several years. It's essentially operational support.
Very good. Further questions? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Commissioner Emery,
Yes.
Commissioner Webster,
Yes.
Commissioner Olshausen,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson is excused, Commissioner Garber,
Yes.
and Chairman Broder.
Yes.
I move to approve the minutes of the July 11th, 2023 Public Safety and Courts Committee meeting.
Support.
Motion with support. Discussion on the minutes. All in favor of approving those minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Garber, back to you.
I move that we approve the intergovernmental agreement for the joint management of the Shiawassee River Trail and authorize the board chair to execute the same.
Support.
A motion with support. Discussion on that. Somebody want to just give a brief explanation of it?
Well, we do own part of the trail, the James Minor Trail, so I think this is a great move for us, and I appreciate the support in that endeavor.
Bike-riding trail, cooperative effort to keep it so that people can use it.
I think it's a very popular trail in the area. All right then, if there's nothing else, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Emery,
Yes.
Commissioner Webster,
Yes.
Commissioner Olshausen,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson is excused, Commissioner Garber,
Yes.
Commissioner Howard,
Yes.
Chairman Broder.
Yes. That is approved.
I move that we approve the minutes of the July 11th, 2023 Health and Human Services Committee meeting.
Support.
Motion with support. Discussion on the minutes. All in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those minutes are approved. Thank you, Commissioner Garber, again. All right, a few comments from me. I wanted everybody to know, very exciting thing tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. We're going to leak test the dome across the street on the courthouse. We're moving along well. the Corunna Fire Department's coming with one of their trucks and ladders, and they're gonna hose that thing down. So that'll be kind of fun to watch if anybody wants to see it. Also, I wanted to mention, we're moving along really well with the state's blight program. We've gotten in the bids on the Simplicity Building in Durand. They have come in as expected, so unless something very untoward happens, we'll be tearing that down. Lennon has moved ahead with what they're doing, so that's a very successful thing. Great news on round 2. Now, round 2 is not under the land bank's control to decide, but one of the things that went to the state for our county did get approved. We're tearing down that awful abandoned motel next to the Arby's on M21. Pardon me?
I think it was called Welcome Inn.
Yes, the Welcome Inn.
Unwelcome.
And anybody who drives down there is saying yay, because we're finally tearing down that eyesore. And the state is paying about $400,000 for it. So that's a great thing for our community. We got round 3 is still in the talking section, but it looks like we are going to have a grant just shy for our land bank this time. Our land bank I've been very, very happy with what we've done in the last year and a half. We're going to bring in probably another almost $500,000 into the community for more blight remediation. We got things to tear down and some other options for that. So we're going to be working on that. And they're already talking about a round 4, which it looks like will again be something that we submit applications to the state and the state gets to decide. So we have we've got that round 2, we're very successful. I'm thrilled about tearing that awful motel down. And we've got round 3 that's going to put 2.5 times the amount of blight money we had in round 1 to do some excellent blight remediation. If you recall, at our last meeting, we had a gentleman show up, and he was very concerned about the RV park that was across from him, that perhaps they had not adhered to their site plan. Dr. Boggs, myself, and Eric, after lunch one day, we took a drive by and a drive through. And while it is possible there are some site plan things they have to fix, I just wanted to assure you that this place is very far from a blighted. It's a very nice park, and they've done a lot of good stuff. They probably have some things they're going to have to, do according to what they agreed to. But this is not a critical thing that's a blight on our community. I think it's a very nice place. In case you didn't know, the vets are now in their new facility, and if you haven't had a chance to see it yet, definitely take a walk through or come to the open house when we have it. It's late, but turned out very, very nice, I think. That's all I have for today. Dr. Boggs?
Is there a date for that open house?
We don't have a date yet. I think we're going to have 2 things. We're going to have an open house, and then probably later on they're going to put up a monument, and they're going to want to do a dedication there. So I think we'll have 2 events. At least that's what I've heard. It's kind of in their hands. It's their facility. We're leaving it up to them. We're going to work with what they want to do. Dr. Boggs?
So a couple of quick things. So now that the audit is finished for last year, 2022, we're going to be starting to work on the budget for 2024. Commissioner Garber and myself talked this morning after the leadership meeting about working on our memo that we'll be sending out to everyone and department heads about the parameters for the budget. Initially, I think that it's safe to say most budgets will be frozen about where they are. Because remember, we used $1.1 million of ARPA money last year to balance the budget. We don't have that luxury this year. Now, while taxes have gone up, it has not gone up enough to that amount. So wages will go up with everyone's steps, and the step and ladder system that we currently have where they're supposed to be. But as far as positions, extra projects, stuff like that, we're kind of in a holding pattern at this point in time. But there'll be more to come with that. Commissioner Garber and myself are going to talk about our memo in coming weeks. The wage study guy, Mark Notley, was here, and he met with the department heads this week. And he has all of the information that he needs to go back and finish calculating his study. Anticipate a presentation sometime in the fall. He still has some more work to do and collect on comparable information steps that we may or may not be able to do and what time frame we need to do them in, based on what we get back from the wage study. It's too early to make any predictions at this time. The courthouse is running on time for our renovations. They have started to paint. They are fixing the walls back up. They are going to be moving to the parking lots next. As Commissioner Broder said, since we have not had a lot of rain and we want to look at the inside of the attic, because we've had a few spots over the years that have been long-term leaks. We're hoping that we have gotten those fixed, but we're going to spray the roof and the dome in different parts at different rates of speed. Because a little bit of water, maybe it doesn't leak, because when we do get rain, right now it's just kind of a drizzle, but at a more high pressure amount, we might have some leaks. So we're going to try to simulate a heavy rainstorm tomorrow with the cooperation of the city of Corona at 10 a.m. The Veterans Facility has a temporary occupancy, which means that they've been given a temporary permit. They can move in, and they have moved in, but they still have a few things left to do. They still have a little bit of roofing to do, a little bit of trim, some extra landscaping stuff. I will check on the plants, but as of right now, it has not been turned over to us completely from the builder yet. They're still working on that. It is subject to a final walkthrough and inspection, because they have at least one more draw coming for their funds. And last but not least, today at 2 o'clock, the sheriff had a press release here in this room, a press conference related to a cold case murder that they have reopened and are proceeding with. So there will be interesting articles coming out about that in the coming days, and probably will be on the news tonight.
I, for one, will commit to one day a week going and watering those plants.
Thank you. See, that's the spirit. That's what,
Because we should need to do it for more than a handful of weeks.
right, just to get them established.
Yeah. So we'll see who else we can round up to do that. All right, this be a second opportunity for the public to address this board. Anybody like to do that? Seeing no one step forward, this meeting's adjourned.
You and I need to have a conversation, or you need to attend a Poverty 101 class. Nobody